This is how to install a race body kit on a BMW S1000RR specific to the tail and subframe. This video is specifically on changing out the subframe to, in this case, a lighter Alpha Racing lightweight short subframe and the associated carbon fiber tailpiece that goes with it, which does include a seat molded into the tail. There's another video that's focused on all the front fairings, and the link to that's in the description below. Logically, if we're going to put a new tail section on, the first thing we got to do is remove the old tail section. We'll start by taking the cowling off. My toolkit, my manual out. Take the seat off. I'll put that bolt right back there so I don't lose it. Next, I'll take these side panels off because I'm going to have to get at the attachments points for the subframe. There's that piece. Same on the other side. Now I'll start taking the plastic here off. Screws here. Couple more up here. These screws here need to come out next. Getting closer. There's a couple screws right down there. Okay, and there's the top tail. The next thing will be the blinker and plate assembly. All right, there's 5 screws on this particular tail tidy, and I think I need to take those off to get to the one screw that holds all this to the frame. All right, now that part comes off. And there's the big bolt that holds this whole tail tidy to the subframe. That's loose. I need to start disconnecting my cables and wires. So there's the tail light. I can pop that connector off. I think this connector is what feeds everything else back here, so pull that loose, cut all those, get the dikes and cut these. All right, there's that assembly. We'll have to take the exhaust mount loose from the subframe, so I'll do that next. All right, exhaust is loose. First thing will be disconnecting the battery and then just pulling the guts. And the gas tank actually attaches right there as well. Well, it's definitely shorter, so I'm sure it'll be lighter. Oh no. So I have to use a heavy aluminum exhaust bracket instead of my nice light carbon. So those are probably for the exhaust mount. I need to start stripping all this cable and everything back, peel it forward so that I can remove this one, put the new subframe in, and then lay it back in. So I'm trying to do minimum damage as I do it. This chunk here for the fuse box, that's just a pop out kind of rivety looking thing. So I'll pop that out of there. Take those 2 rivets and put them off to the side. Now all this cable is kind of tied up and around there. This whole battery box and gas tank, those 3 bolts are what I think goes in these 3 bolts here on the subframe. It'd be nice if I didn't have to pull this stuff loose. I probably should disconnect the battery before I electrocute myself. I'll put the bolt right where it was so I don't lose that. The grounds can be loose. If they touch the frame, it's fine. It's the hot side that I'm a little bit more concerned with. All right, there's the positives. And I've got the main positive and negative, but I also have these little ones which are for the battery tender that's off to the side. So I'll need to snip that loose from where it attaches to the frame. So that's loose. Now in theory, if I could just levitate all that stuff and swap these lower subframes out, that would be ideal, but not a Jedi, so I don't see that happening. So I'll start taking these 3 screws out each side. Okay, now in theory, my ABS and battery box could all come out. Now the gas tank is loose, so that's good. So in theory, I could just start slipping this out the bottom. I do have to disconnect my rear master cylinder. There's a bracket that holds my brake line in that, so I probably should pull that whole bracket off. Let's get this master cylinder loose first. Guess I might as well start taking the big ones loose and see what happens. And there is a nut on the back side here, so I'll need a wrench for that. Now, before I start taking this next one loose, I'm going to throw a blanket underneath here just in case this whole thing would fall or something would fall. I can catch it and not scratch up my fender and swing arm. That's right, I'm going to use a Harley Davidson blanket on my BMW motorcycle. I'll make the Germans happy. I've got brake lines going right across the nut on the other side. There's that one. See if I can catch that nut coming down. All right, all 4 bolts are out of the subframe. Now, how likely is it this thing will just fall out of place? Not very. So I know that's one bolt there I have to address is this one. I have to get that little bracket off there, so I'll have to kind of finagle a wrench from the other side. Finally use the extender from the other side to pull this screw off for the brake lines. So I'm going to get that screw out of there so I don't lose that. Now everything down here's loose. The gas part's loose. The only thing that's really kind of connected is the big old battery box. Oh no. Brake bracket. Battery box kind of pops out of here. In theory, I might be able to just slide that right out of there. Okay. And there's the old subframe. New one is definitely a lot shorter, which is great. I've got the 3 holes in each side, which is good. These are the exhaust bracket mounts. Surely it can't be just as easy as sliding this in like I slid the old one out, but we'll try. Bolt hole right on the inside of the Alpha is where this bracket will go. I just got to put that back in place. Actually, it's going on there not too bad. I've got the bracket in place for the master cylinder, and that's put back. There's a hole for that. The lower struts here are threaded, so I don't need the nut on the back side. I can just thread those into the member. This one up here will still have a nut on the back side, so I'll get those started. I got to remember to put the nuts on the other side, but let's get this started here first. Now, next thing to keep everything happy is the gas tank and the battery box into it. Let's go find those screws. I'm not putting everything torqued down all the way. I'm just trying to get things started. On the stock one, these rear bolts for the battery box were a smaller bolt. On the Alpha one, they're all 3 the bigger ones. So just a heads up on that. And there's a good chance that I should have had that come through here, and I need to take all that loose. Yeah, it should have gone through here. Damn it. While I'm messing around here, It's a good idea to fill up the brake fluid too and just make sure it's got enough. I'll go ahead and tighten all these 6 screws here. Next, I'll tighten the 4 bolts that hold the subframe to the main frame. And remember, you only need nuts on the upper ones. The bottom ones are threaded. And the new bracket has a threaded boss down here, so you only need the bolt. You don't need the nut that was on the backside. This is going to have to get tucked back into the tail. So I'm just going to tie it up here kind of to give it a little bit of support before we start cramming it in there. What we definitely don't want to do is damage any of these connectors. So maybe I can just kind of tie them up and around out of the way. The other thing before we slide the tail on is we want to reconnect the battery, because once we put this on, we can't access it anymore. All right, let's get the rear tail. Let's slide it over. Okay. Now, I still have to get my exhaust on, so maybe I should do that first. This is carbon fiber, so you don't want to over torque it and crack that. You'll be buying a new one. Exhaust is solid. Now we just have these 4 bolts we got to get lined up. I'm going to start these bolts now. I want them on the lowest position possible of those 4 holes, because I want my whole body to be in the lowest position so that I have the least amount of drag and resistance. The front piece can't actually go all the way down to the bottom, so I'm gonna have to make it go to the 2nd hole, because of basically the way all the guts inside are holding it up. I've got the rear bolt the lowest position. This one will be 2nd to lowest. Make sure everything comes on yet. That's a good sign. All right, tail section is done. These pieces used to go like that, but they can't go in there anymore. So I may have to chop these off right here, but fortunately I still had the original pieces. They're not lightweight carbon fiber, but they're what I have, so that's what I'm gonna have to use to try to sheet that in, and then I'll just chop it back here to meet the rear tail section. Start these screws just so they're properly placed. All right, so that panel's in the place it goes. Now what I need to do is make a Calvert eye estimate on where that's going to go, and then tape it. Well, let's start there and see how that does. Be good enough to get in there and meet up that carbon fiber. I'm going to do the other side now, make that match. It's in place. I'd really rather it was the carbon fiber like everything else, but since I can't buy the carbon fiber version of this anymore, and I don't want to chop up my good ones, I'm just going to have to do this, but it's okay. Got it chopped to meet the carbon tail, everything bolted down, and that'll keep that air flowing across here nice and smooth. Subscribe to my YouTube channel below, and let's celebrate turning fuel and air into adrenaline.